Hey there, welcome to Healthy TV episode number 75. I'm your host, Dr. John McPhee, and on today's show, I'm talking about something I've learned in business, but actually really helps when choosing the right foods. Curious? Keep watching. In episode number 74, I talked about the two key criteria when you're choosing food. We talked about choosing foods that are high in nutrient density and low in toxicity. And that actually leads to, when we start to apply that when you're faced with food choices, that it really helps to narrow down what's the best choice for you. And I encourage you to just think about what foods, when you're given a choice between two different foods or a variety of foods to put on your plate, just to simply look at them and say, okay, what's going to have the highest nutrient density and the lowest toxicity? Okay, and that's pretty simple. Another accompanying principle that goes along with that actually comes from business. It's the concept of opportunity cost. Now, an opportunity cost, it really just comes from this idea that we have essentially an unlimited amount of options when we look at our lives. So opportunity cost presents everywhere. So you think of any choice that you're making in business. Let's say it's choosing between opportunity A and opportunity B. And if I choose opportunity A, that leads to a certain set of benefits and risks, and opportunity B has its own benefits and risks. When I choose opportunity A over opportunity B, I actually lose out on any of the benefits I get from opportunity B. So I need to consider what are the costs, not just the risks involved in that choice, but the risks of the things I'm missing out on by not choosing something else. Okay? So this actually applies really well to food. When you're faced with choices, and let's say you're looking at building a plate, and a good example here is let's say you are trying to decide whether you want to continue to eat rice. Okay, and in Eat by Design, we talk about how rice is a grain, and grains are necessarily, based on how they're designed, their structure is toxic, right? It creates damage in the body. And white rice has the least amount of toxicity. In fact, white rice is simply just sugar. Okay, and actually, if you're going to eat any type of rice, I would recommend just eating plain white rice. Okay, and doing it in very sparing amounts because it's a lot of sugar. However, let's say you're choosing, should you put rice on your plate or potatoes? Okay, when we look at nutrient value, there's actually a higher nutrient value to potatoes than rice. Okay, so that would be one way of looking at it. But the other thing is that if you were to choose to put rice on your plate, you're actually losing out. It's not just that you're not gaining from that food, you're actually missing out on what you would have put there in its place. So you're actually missing out on a higher nutrient density food for the sake of that lower nutrient density food. So it's a really simple question to ask yourself: what am I losing by making this choice? And also, what am I gaining? So you want to be considerate of both those columns, but don't just factor in what's in that food that's maybe a negative or bad for you, but it's also what could be in its place. And ultimately, if you're filling a plate, if you fill it up with a bunch of, let's say, rice or pasta, that's calories. You're going to consume those instead of eating things like vegetables or other complex carbohydrates like, say, potatoes. Okay, so I encourage you to consider that opportunity cost of the choices you're making, and just make choices that have a lower opportunity cost. All right, put that into practice. Let me know how it applies. If it's not clear, put it in the comments below, because I'd be happy to come at it from a different angle. Okay, all right, thanks, and we'll talk next week.